how affiliates can grow in Brazil and India amid ad curbs, tax shocks, and Google volatility.
Oh, my name is Keith Geary. I am the director of casino at Game Lounge. For those of you who don't know Game Lounge, we are among many other things, we're a casino affiliate. I manage 26 websites all around the world for casino affiliates. Today we're here to talk about, among other things, regulation, advertisements, taxes, and mainly focused on Brazil and India. So there's been some huge changes in these markets in Brazil and India. And we're going to focus a bit on the Google updates and that's happened in the last year as well. As many of you know, the Google updates have been a bit of a nightmare in some points. We've had traffic swings of between 20 and 30 and even 60% from the Google updates. So there's been some huge changes that we got to focus on. So why should you listen to me? A little bit about me. I've been in the gaming industry for about 15 years. I've managed the Brazilian and Indian markets from both an operator and affiliate, from both operator and affiliate styles. I wrote my dissertation on how regulation affects the marketing strategy of the businesses they regulate in the gambling industry. And I recently spent some time in India when I did part of my MBA, so I have a little bit of insight there as well. So let's get into it. There's been some massive changes in the both Brazilian and Indian markets over the last year. Brazil has quickly becoming the biggest regulated market for gambling in the world, and India went the complete opposite direction and almost overnight became a black market. So I'll talk a little bit about India, I'll give you some stats, I'll talk about a bit about Brazil, and then I'll get into a little bit about how Game Lounge treats these changes, how we can manage these markets going forward. So let's talk about India for a bit. As I mentioned before, I was able to do some of my school, some of my masters in India, and it was really, really cool. We did basically a crash course in the Indian market, marketing in India, economics, operations of India. We managed to, we went to visit a Coca-Cola factory and an emergency response call center. And what was really interesting is every single thing we did, everything we saw was compared to the British market. Everything was benchmarked against how they do it in London. And what my professor told me was that for hundreds of years, basically the British, when they ruled India, they told the Indians they couldn't govern themselves. They wouldn't be able to govern themselves without the British. So when India finally gained independence, they basically overcompensated. They added a ton of bureaucracy, a ton of red tape. They really intervened in the public space. My professor once told me a story about how his friend was trying to open up a peanut stand, just a tiny little stand on the side of the road, and he had to go through 6 months of environmental impact and had to fill in tons and tons of forms just to open up a little stand. So that's why I was shocked and find it so interesting how quickly they went through passing the law to ban online gambling in India. It was introduced on a Tuesday, and it was written into law on a Thursday. Insanely fast for any government to do, let alone one that's known for bureaucracy and red tape. You're talking about an industry that hired and employed hundreds of thousands of people in the country. The industry was looking to be worth about $9 billion in the next 2 years. Cricket is their biggest sport in India, and the national team of cricket was sponsored by a fantasy sports betting operator. Their Premier League of cricket had sponsorships all over the place. It is a huge, huge industry. All of this overnight illegal. So it's a massive, massive change. But here's the thing. Just because the government changes overnight and decides to make this illegal by no means it's the players are going to stop. VPN downloads shot up 33% in the 2 months following. And those aren't the players that are casual players. They're the hardcore gamblers. A little bit of a side note: Telegram has become huge in the casino industry as well. There's lots of casinos now on Telegram. Guess what the biggest market for Telegram is? India. 15% of all Telegram users are based in India. So this is painting a picture that is not so much the most responsible gaming market. It's painting a bit of a picture of somewhere that's going completely black. However, this doesn't mean that we should abandon India altogether. India is still a very, very lucrative market. One of the things the Supreme Court changed is they focused on esports. They're trying to focus a lot more on esports. So you have the option to pivot to content toward more skill-based games. There's a signal to shift from exposure to exploration. It's time to invest more in content diversification, skill-based verticals, and data-led audiences. So basically, when regulation stabilizes, those with an ethical, SEO-driven response will be the first in the door. Let's move on to Brazil. They've decided to regulate online marketing in the last year, and now they're becoming the biggest biggest gambling market in the world. I spoke to one of my friends who's an old colleague based in Brazil, based in Rio, and he said something very interesting. He said, the gold rush is over, now it's all about compliance. So he mentioned some of the things that I think are very interesting for affiliates. First off, the welcome bonuses are now gone. So now retention funnels are so much more important. Crypto payments are completely not allowed anymore in Brazil. So you got to be really careful who you're partnering with. Player value, and this is really interesting. Player value is actually quite low in Brazil. Even though it's the biggest market, the average bet is less than €8. The average monthly spend is about 25 euros. So number one, you got to make sure this is the right market to invest in. Number two, sales teams, those rev shares are not going to cut it. It's got to be hybrids and flat fees. Finally, the tax. The Brazilian government decided that, obviously they saw billions of revenue coming in. They decided we're going to double the tax in terms of taxing operators and affiliates. Then they decided let's even increase that to 2.5 times the tax. Now they're debating do they apply that retrospectively, which is a pretty ballsy move, if you're going to ask me. But what all this means is it's a definition of an opportunity, but it's about being compliant. We need to build compliant partnerships, integrate data sharing, create more community-first content rather than kind of promotional funnels. And more than ever in Brazil, EEAT, your money, your life, and compliance signals are going to be really, really important, and this will drive much more traffic. So what does this all mean for affiliates? Let's get down to how this all matters to us. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at Game Lounge and the way I see the best way forward. So these are some of the tips that we're doing at Game Lounge. Player quality. So using behavioral data and making sure you really understand your LTV and really understand where you're investing. Transparent and compliant funnels. You got to make sure your traffic is clear, and you got to be traceable and transparent reporting so you really understand and you're clear with your operators. Deep localization, and I cannot stress this enough. Localization does not mean just translation. And I'll tell you a very quick story about when I was working on the Argentinian market with a colleague who was from Spain. And he told me that the difference between the Spain Spanish and Argentinian Spanish. In one language, the term for put on a jacket, in the other language meant put on a condom. So you really, really have to have localized content because otherwise it's not going to work. Geographical diversification. Again, this is incredibly important. Look at what happened to India. You can't put all your eggs in one basket because overnight, one of the biggest markets could completely disappear. So geographical diversification is incredibly important. Finally, one of the biggest things is agility. I mean, if you look at what happened in India, overnight, that's gone. Brazil went the opposite way. It became one of the biggest markets in the world. India is now, actually, as of yesterday, they're looking, the Supreme Court is actually reviewing the law. So India might go back the opposite direction, and they're looking at legalizing tournaments for betting, which is completely the opposite of what they said. And Brazil is potentially doubling your tax retrospectively. So agility is so important. So as I said, agility, deep localization, geographical diversification, transparent and compliant funnels, and player quality. These are the most important when managing affiliates in this new world, and especially with these markets. This isn't just about compliance. It's about shifting from being a traffic source to being a strategic partner with growth. You want operators that can trust. So it's about being a strategic partner for growth. And that's what's most important. Thank you very much.